I now request our esteemed chief guest, Mr. Sandip Somany, to address the gathering.
So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for having me over. Salilji is a very dear friend, and I also see among the various people who are listening in another old friend of mine, Sushmita ji. And you know, we had a great tenure together when I was PhD president and she was our Secretary General. Now I will, Salilji had asked me, Mr. Das, can you do page number 1?
Yes, sir.
So, yeah, Salilji had actually asked me to speak about leadership requirements in the post-COVID world. And for that, I thought it would be better to have a little structured presentation. And after that, before that, I will speak a little bit about more about the economic effects of COVID in terms of the medical effects. I think we are all doctorates now in WhatsApp University. And then we can have a freewheeling session in terms of question and answer. So, can we, Mr. Das, the screen is not coming.
Yeah, please ask them to give me control.
Pranav, there must be Mr. M.K. Das. You can pass the control to him for the screen sharing.
He has got the right, he can share.
Okay. Somebody, इसमें screen में आ रहा है. You cannot start screen share while the other participant is sharing. अभी इसमें करो. मुझे पहले unmute. नहीं करना है.
These are some little. Yes.
Yeah.
Mr. Das, your screen, yes, we can see now.
Okay.
Oh.
I see my face there.
Yes, yes.
Using.
Can you see now?
No, we can't.
Yeah, now it's coming, Sandeep.
No.
Sandeep's iPad.
No, that is my iPad, but it shouldn't be there. The content is on Mr. Das's iPad.
Yeah, but it's coming now.
You mean this time new to Let's go.
So, Salilji, you can see the content. It's okay by me.
No, we can't. We can't. We are seeing your. Yeah, we can't see the content.
Yeah.
I think
we can hear well.
Yeah, we can hear. Good evening, Mathur Saab. Yes, welcome.
Somebody has to actually stop sharing the screen.
My greetings to Somany ji when he came to Petronet LNG.
Yes, Mathur Saab, how are you, sir?
I am very fine. Great to see you. You're looking good. And
thank you, sir.
Looking forward to hearing you.
Here it
now,
comes.
Mr. Das, if you can make it full screen,
yeah,
then we are on board.
Good thing. You have to have patience to see good things.
Yeah. So you can go to the next page. Page 2. Now you can come to the page 3. So, you know, the world when we were growing up, till very recently also, we always knew the words BC and AD. I think their context has now changed. It is now before Corona and after Corona. I think the world after Corona will be very, very different from the world we were used to just before March, as far as India is concerned. I think COVID-19 is not just a temporary crisis. It will be a permanent disruptor. And coronavirus is the political, economic, and psychological event of our lifetime that will drive disruption and transformation for years to come. It will bring about radical transformation of the kind that occurs only in 1 or 2 generations. And I believe always that every crisis leaves its innovative legacy. We must learn from history. The Black Death, which killed as much as a third of Europe's population during the 14th century, led to severe labor scarcity. Resultantly, higher wages, eroded feudalism, encouraged innovation in agricultural technology and accumulation of capital, and ultimately spurred on the Industrial Revolution. The Great Depression caused a waste not, want not attitude that defined consumer patterns for decades. The 1970s oil supply shock led to the first efforts on energy conservation, efficiency, and independence. And more recently, the 2003 SARS epidemic helped jumpstart China's nascent e-commerce sector and ushered in the era of mobile payment in the country. The moral of the story is that humanity always innovates after crisis. Can we have the next slide? So if you see, I have broadly grouped the fundamental changes into 3 different buckets. There will be a distinct shift in the consumer preferences to go digital, to have reduction in terms of, in the short term of spending. There will be there will be a completely new normal in the go-to-market strategy. There will be contactless sales. There will be significant growth. They were growing even earlier, but I think this pandemic has completely changed the dynamics for e-commerce and digital marketing. I think they will grow exponentially. And there will be new products and new lines of products and new markets that we will identify if we are smart. And then, of course, it will spur digitization in consumers and organizations like never before in history. Can we have the next one slide, please? The question we have to ask ourselves in the post-COVID era, are we relevant for the consumers today? This is what companies and managements must ask. Why should they continue with us, our consumers? Which customer needs are taking the center stage? The needs are changing. What do we do well for our customers? What are we not doing well? These are all difficult questions we must ask ourselves. And if we were starting all over now as a fresh company, new company, what can we do differently? I think, it's very important to answer these questions and also change the answers, change the questions, and change the assumptions based on what industry that you are in. New opportunities are being created and many old opportunities will die. And that's the fact of life. So anybody who's proactive and ahead of the curve stands to come out much stronger, and those companies which are behind the curve will come out much weaker, if at all. There will be a lot of death, unfortunately. The next slide, Mr. Das. If you look at India, we were on a slightly weaker wicket economically before the crisis struck us. But India is a huge country. On the left-hand side, you will see each of our states are equivalent to the GDP of independent countries. And on the right side, you will see that, we have many, many countries within our one country. Each of our states are equivalent to large European countries, even a population of 60, 80, 85 million. So I personally remain an optimist. I believe that India will continue to grow, barring a short time when this pandemic will cause negative growth. And I believe because of the young population base, young age and the large base, we will continue to have growth. Now, whether all are able to share in the growth and be part of this growth, that remains to be seen. I think there will be, personally, I think there will be a lot of change and a lot of death in terms of people who are not, doing what is needed to be done speedily. If you come to the next slide, this gives you a quick look of Asia. If you look at the bottommost slide, it clearly shows that 300 years ago, Asia was about 60% of global GDP. Now, this might come as a surprise to some of you. And the slide shows that in the next 30 years, as per projections, Asian countries will again be around 50% of the global GDP. If you look at the Indian GDP, it has been growing steadily and will continue to grow. And if you look at the right triangle, it shows that even our affluent population is equivalent to the full population of Mexico. So there is a market at every price point in India, which we should never forget. In these, I would say, difficult times, it's very easy to forget the positives of India, but I don't think we should ever do that. We should always remind ourselves that, there will be growth in the country. If we come to the next slide, there has been a lot of pessimism, and partly correctly, because of the coronavirus across the globe. We are not only pessimists in India, I think worldwide, there is deep concern about the coronavirus and its effects on the economy. So and we must always, let history teach us. I'm a great believer that history can teach us a lot of lessons. We don't need to recreate the wheel and reinvent the wheel. So if we come to the next slide, it's a very interesting slide, which shows you various crises that have happened in the past 50, 60 years, and how many days it has taken post that crisis for the world to recover. And that is in the green circle or semicircle that you see. In our near future, the global financial crisis was the biggest crisis that we saw recently. And that took 1,022 days for the recovery to come. I think if we had figures for the Great Depression, it would be longer. But if you see, and the jury is still out on the COVID because it is very recent, so we can't quantify the days it will take, but it only shows that there is an ascending graph and the world economy comes back to an even keel after some period of time. I think this is very important, that we don't lose focus and we don't lose heart. I think because of the crisis, I'm personally already seeing great many benefits that this COVID has brought to us. It has brought a lot of disruption, but it has also got many positives. I think agility has improved across the board, particularly in corporates. I think new talent is emerging. With this work from home, a lot more people can come to the job market who could earlier not attend office from 9 to 5, but they can sit at their homes and do the task quite happily and efficiently. New, time frames have got compressed. So that I think is also very important, particularly in a country like India, where we work with a certain amount of, as I may put it in Hindi, susti. Cultural change I can see. There are things you can do today, mindset change I can see. There are things you can do in corporates today, which even 5 months ago you would break your head against the wall for many senior people to accept those changes. So I think it's great. If you can take the advantage of the situation, there are many positives. You can look at new opportunities. COVID is creating new opportunities altogether. So, I will also speak about what Salilji asked me to, which was the leadership requirements for a CEO. post-COVID. Now, I don't have figures for India, but from a recent US research, I will quote to you that 2/3 of the current US CEOs will be fired in the next 3 years because of the change being so dramatic. 65 to 75% of the US managers in the public and private sector alienate their people, their own staff. 70% of the American workforce say that worst aspect of their lives is their boss. Now, that's not a good situation. You cannot work as a cohesive team if you dislike your boss so much. And it is such a large percentage across the organization. The financial consequences of leadership is very, very important. The US research also shows that high-performing executives, each of them, can add up to $25 million in profits across 6 years just by their individual contribution in a company. US research also shows that companies profit more by a 2:1 ratio from avoiding toxic hires than from recruiting star performers. So if your success with a star performer is 1, by not hiring a bad CEO, your success rate is 2. And now it is statistically proven in the US that CEOs account for more variability in the firm's performance than any other objective factor. So, Mr. Das, if we can have the next slide. Mr. Das? So I think there's going forward post-COVID, I think the CEO has a tough role to play. And he is a very crucial link in whether the company emerges successful or otherwise. And I think again, I have bunched into 3 buckets the key roles that they will have to play. One is in relation to people, one is in relation to process, and one is in relation to time. Because COVID, you cannot open a book and consult what happened in the past history in life for corporates and otherwise. You have to innovate as you go. And therefore, the strength of leadership will come out. This will separate, as they say, the wheat from the chaff. The companies that will do well will be driven by very great leaders, and the companies that will fall by the wayside will have poor leadership. So I think choosing a good CEO, whether it's a family managed business or a professionally managed business, whether it's a family run CEO or a professional CEO, it doesn't matter. But the quality of the CEO is extremely important going forward. And I have put together, Mr. Das, next slide. I have put together a bucket list of the attributes of a post-COVID CEO. It could be an MD, it could be a CEO, it doesn't matter. The designation doesn't matter. I think these are the key attributes of a CEO which are even more important in today's day and age, particularly things like openness, particularly the ability to inspire others. Very, very important, low ego. We normally, in India, we are a paternalistic society. Powers are all from top to bottom. So I think those kind of structures will crumble if they are held on to too rigidly. I think these are the things that we need in a good CEO to come out of this better than we went into the crisis. And I think this is, they are self-explanatory, so I won't give, I won't go into it for too much detail. But, these are all the things that will be required by any company's CEO if he has to drive growth in the future. If you come to the next slide, I think one of the very important things that the CEO must do, and actually the entire organization must do, is reset the cost base, whether it's raw material, sales and marketing, service, logistics, fixed costs. People are thinking big. I know of companies that are talking of It's not that they've achieved it or they may not achieve it in the first year, but people are talking now of cutting 50% of their fixed cost. People are talking of converting fixed cost to significantly variable cost. So in a downturn like this, they have no, rope around their neck. I think people are thinking dramatically differently from what they were thinking earlier. And I think there will be a lot of pain in the economy in terms of support functions, in terms of people delivering to larger corporates, in terms of casual labor, in terms of outsourced people, in terms of the decrease of employment, because everybody wants to be more competitive now. And that's the only, with the demand remaining uncertain, somebody is talking V recovery, somebody is talking U recovery, somebody is talking L recovery. So no, everybody, the jury is out how quickly or otherwise the economy will recover. Most people are predicting India will have a -6% GDP this year. There are forecasts from -9 to -4, but they're all minus. There is not one forecast which is positive. And for a country like India to have minus, this is first time in probably many, many years. At least in my living memory, this would be the first negative GDP growth by a large percentage. So everybody is talking of recovery next year. This year, more or less 4 months have only passed. We have to survive the rest of the 8 months. And all companies are looking at every option in order to progress. Can we have the next slide? And I think one of the things that the CEO must do and the board itself must do, in our companies, we have used this tool extremely well, is that the board has to go out of its comfort zone and only talk of the agenda items to focus discussions on what I would say, tick in the box items, which we do in our board meetings for all the legal compliances, statutory compliances. Those will be done. They take 20 minutes of the meeting. I think the bulk of the meeting has to be spent in discussing the strategy and the implementation of the strategy of the company. I think that is the core focus, whether it is the CEO or the board of directors. I think they need to be extremely focused on what they want to do and how they will go about doing it. So we actually in our boards sometimes have 3-hour meetings just on strategy and how we will take them forward. What are we doing wrong? What are we doing right? How can we course correct if we are doing something wrong? And very free and open question. It's not a question of criticizing anyone. It's a question of setting the right direction and making sure that we continue to follow the right direction. So you have to have focus, you have to have engagement, you have to have a lot of data and analytics, you have to leverage the strengths of the board. We try and keep people on our board who can complement the business, who can give advice on the business. Since we have a lot of B2C businesses, we have experts on brands, we have experts on marketing, on demographics, in terms of understanding the growth spots in India, etc., etc. So it's very important that we focus and we use the board as a tool for growth. And this slide is my absolute favorite slide. The next one. There is never a wrong time to do the right thing. I think this has even more deeper meaning in today's day and age than when it was written. And we live by this. We don't go into history. We don't try and castigate anyone or cry over spilt milk. If we decide that we need to correct today, then we start correcting today. There is no good time to correct or a bad time to correct. Any time to correct is a right time. And I think for even very successful companies, even if you are a successful company, you must ask 4 questions at regular intervals internally and to the board. 1, why are we great? We must continue to ask ourselves that question, because you may be great today, but 2 years later, you may not be great. What is the competition doing? We must fundamentally keep tracking competition. What is competition doing? 3rd, what data is fascinating. So if you are a B2C company, what consumer data that is being churned out, which you have access to now, is fascinating. What is the change in the consumer data that you can take some meaning out of? And what powerful patterns drive our business? So that's also extremely important in terms of what you can do in terms of the patterns driving the business. So sometimes there is a pattern across. So when cameras were replaced with digital, that was a pattern that emerged. And the cameras where the films were used have become obsolete except for some very high-end photography. The whole industry died. When floppy disks, when CDs came, floppy drives completely were eliminated. So, there are transitions at a macro scale in the world happening today, which will decimate many industries. And I think we need to be extremely, extremely vigilant for those kind of, transitions and those kind of developments. So that is the formal part of the presentation. I think Darshanji asked me in his address, said that what do we do right? What do we do wrong? What are the things that have driven us? I think it's not one thing. I think today, in order to be successful in business, you have to do a lot of right things, and then also pray that luck is on your side. So I think that will be more fun in an interactive session in terms of what people want to ask. Please feel free, and I'll answer to the best of my ability.
Thank you, Sandeep. I think it is like you took a master class here. What a amazing, it wasn't a presentation. Every slide was so insightful. And the way you work, I'm sure all of us now, you get to understand what makes a good leader. He made sure that whatever he was going to say was to the point, focused and perfect to the T. Couldn't have been better. Now we know what we were asking right from the beginning and saying, what makes Sandip Somany the leader that he has become. Great and very inspiring. I'm sure there's a lot of young people, Sandip, they will be asking a couple of questions to you, and they must have been really inspired. We couldn't have got a better person to address our 38th annual meet. I'll leave the floor open for people. What I will be doing is that on the chat box, anyone who wants to ask a question can just give their name. I will call out the name, and then you can directly ask that question yourself. So we can start. So whoever asks a question, so I see there is a quick one from, there is Ganesh Mehta who wants to ask something. He's a chartered accountant, young chartered accountant. So go on, Ganesh, unmute and ask your question.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Ask.
Thank you for the very refreshing speech, sir. It was really very inspiring and knowledgeable.
Carry on.
Yeah. So my question is that while your talk was regarding what changes will take place after COVID, and given that the uncertainty of the environment, it's difficult to call out what are the possibilities that can happen. Can you share from your personal experience through the years that what are the fundamental things in business or in leadership that don't change irrespective of how the environment functions?
Yeah, that's, I think, a very good question. The fundamentals are not affected by any crisis or pandemic. The fundamentals are always remaining same, and they are very similar for across businesses too. So I think one fundamental is how well do you know your customer will decide how long you will keep him and therefore make profit from him. So knowing your customer, I think, is very important. I think spotting opportunities in the given environment is very important. That decides whether a company is successful over the long term or not. Third, build trust with your customer. We exist as corporates only because there is a buyer for our products. Our DNA in our companies is very, very clear. The smallest of complaints, even if I get, I will make sure that it is attended to. You know, somebody may be complaining about a 20-year old product of ours, and I've heard moaning sometimes with the service guys, sir, ye to bahut purana hai, 20 saal ho gaye. I said, he's still your customer, no? If you can service it, you have to service it. So, you know, you must have that DNA which is customer oriented and customer friendly. You must know yourself. I think this is one very fundamental thing that people forget. I think every one of us has certain, certain assets and certain liabilities. If I were to put it in financial terms, we can do some things well and some things we either don't know or we are not good at it. Now, rather than learning about everything under the sun, it's very important that we can focus on where we are strong and bring in good people who are strong in the areas where we are weak. So I think it's very, very important, and I follow this absolutely to the T. In an area where I am weak, I will always hire a person who's much smarter than me. So he has all the answers, not me, on that subject. So if we were a particular type of technology where I am not familiar, we will always hire the best person available for that technology in our company. So he becomes the sector resource. I think build an organizational culture which is conducive to growth, where things are shared and we don't have a silo structure. That is very important. Seamless communication is very important. Building a culture of openness and trust with your employees is very important. You know, particularly in the post-COVID times, is very important. I have seen young people have a lot of ideas. They're bristling with ideas. You must encourage and have a system of catching those ideas and implementing the ones which deserve to be implemented quickly. I think that's very important. That is how you can make sure that the youngsters feel that they are part of the organization. I think many promoters have told me we are very emotional about our business. I think you should be passionate about your business, not emotional. There's a very big difference. People in India till recently would not sell businesses because, you know, mere dadaji ne chalu kiya tha or my father started it. It's irrelevant who started it. If you can do business well, grow in it. If it's a laggard, if you're number 15 in the list of 15 competitors, if it loses money, there's no purpose being in the business. Sell it when it still has some value, because over a period of time, if the business is not going anywhere, it will keep deteriorating value. In fact, it will reach a situation where sometimes you will lose money and large amounts of it. So never hesitate to take the right call. And always know what your heart is most passionate about, where your individual skills, strengths, preferences, and dislikes lie. So for example, personally, I will never go into a B2G business. I don't like working with the government. I don't like the DNA of the organization when you deal with the government. So all our businesses, when we look at selecting new businesses, we do not anything. It may generate us a pot of gold at the other end of the tunnel, but we will not touch a business where either the government is a supplier or the government is a buyer. So that's our DNA. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. We don't have the DNA. Somebody else could as well have a very good DNA in that business. So we don't have that sector skill and we don't want to be in that business. So we will look at B2C as the first and then B2B as the second type of business. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
There is a long list. So there's one lady there, so I'm calling her out first. Shambhavi, you want to ask something? Please go ahead.
Hello.
Unmute.
Yeah. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes. Carry on.
Okay, great. So you spoke about a couple of places where there's going to be 10 to 15%, and maybe something like logistics or marketing, and people are also looking at 50% cost reduction in fixed costs. I just wanted to know, going forward, that basically it's a two-part question. Where are people going to invest? Because when I was looking at it, it kind of seem like a big chunk of any business and how they run. So where are people going to invest? And in the next 5 to 10 years, which industries do you see that there's going to be a growth, and which industries you think there's going to be a lack of growth?
So let me answer your second question. The first one I didn't get fully, so let me clarify subsequently. So where will there be growth in 10 years? I think all industries will grow. It's not a question that growth will not be there in any particular industry. I think there will be greater growth or lesser growth depending on which sector you are in. So I think the FMCG sector, presently we are all talking and we are influenced by the pandemic. But ultimately, I think if you take broad concepts, digitization will grow. So people like Google, people like Facebook, Twitter, some competitor may come in. So Twitter may have another competitor tomorrow. That's a separate issue. But broadly, I think the digitization concept will continue to grow. So any business which has to do with digitization, e-commerce will continue to grow much faster than the rest of the economy. I think pharmaceuticals will continue to grow. I think, consumer discretionary in the longer period will grow. I think post-COVID, after 2-3 years, we are all human beings. We are wedded to our the way of life. Travel, tourism will also grow. I know it's a very, very badly dissipated industry today, but someday the COVID will go away. And the industry, airline, we as human beings cannot be confined to the homes or only to our city. People want to travel. People want to see new places. People want to get the experience in other countries, other cities, other cultures. So I think all that will revive. But I think artificial intelligence will grow because machine learning will grow, robotics will grow. And these are, when I talk of growth, I'm talking disproportionate to their current size. It will be a significant growth, not a incremental growth. So the first question, the first part of your question is, correct me if I'm wrong, people with savings, where will they invest? Is that the question?
No. So when you spoke about companies, cutting down investment in logistics, sales and marketing, cutting down on fixed costs. So is there where companies usually invest money in? Are there any spheres where company will invest money in? Because when I was looking at that slide, I felt like that is 90% of what companies usually invest in. And if it's not going to be there, where will they be putting the money in? Or
No. So the thing is, we are currently clouded because of this COVID. So currently the amount of money people will save, firstly, is for survival. Many companies need to cut their fixed costs in order to survive and go over this crisis. Otherwise, they will go bankrupt. And that process has already started of people cutting costs very significantly. So there is no saving coming out of it. It is just to survive. But once the economy comes back on a more even keel, these costs that they have been able to bring down, these companies will then invest those extra resources that they have available again in automation. I think automation in India will expand in various kinds of software, in various kinds of processes which will streamline the delivery in terms of speed and in terms of accuracy. So I think everything to do with the customer service and improved servicing of the customer, there will be greater investment there. So we ourselves, for example, this time in the COVID year also, our IT budgets, which includes for processes automation, system automation, is going up by 100%.
Okay.
So there's so many questions, so many. I'd like, if I want to get as many in the next 5 minutes as possible. So please be brief, ask one question. Utkarsh Singhal. Utkarsh, you want there is a question from you. Quickly, please.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, sir. It was a pleasure hearing your address. And my question to you is, what is it that you look for in a professional to build a winning team?
Winning team.
Yes.
Yeah. What do you
Oh,
look for
then-
a professional in a winning team?
I think you have to look for, I gave you a whole bunch of, for a CEO level post or a director, I gave you a whole bunch of things that
Younger
you would
people.
look
It's
for.
a young man asking. So I
Yeah,
think you
so
should say.
I think I would look for, personally, I would look for commitment and passion. Two things.
Excellent.
Competence is a given. He has to be competent, but passion for what they are doing, I think that takes a man up the ladder in the corporate side. And commitment. He must be committed to what they are supposed to do. No slacking off on the job. The jobs are very demanding now.
Thank you,
Rahul
sir.
Garg. Rahul Garg.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, sir. So, you have the distinction to build more than one successful brand. What are the key ingredients you think are necessary to build a successful brand?
So again, very good question. Very detailed answer. I can give you a 45-minute lecture just on this fact.
Quick,
But
2-3 time.
And Salilji is putting me under pressure कि भाई time खत्म हो रहा है, time खत्म हो रहा है.
No,
So-
this you must answer because this is your biggest, this is your success thing. Couple of minutes we'll spend on this. I also want to hear it.
So I think, it's a very complex story. Naming a product is relatively easy. People think by getting the right name, you've built the right brand. That's actually the 5%, 10% of the job. I think fundamentally, when you get into a new product category or you want to get into a new product category, you must ask the very fundamental question, what is it that other competitors are giving that is not satisfying the consumer? So where is my entry slot? What can I serve? What can I give that will delight the customer? So the process of starting has to be, that is the first step. And then you go in terms of product, in terms of features, in terms of pricing, if that's a competitive advantage. But be warned that today the concept of building a new brand, a strong brand, also requires a very deep balance sheet. We have built brands at regular intervals. Few of them are over 1,000 crores in revenue. We've built a pipe brand, which in the first year of its operation did, 350 odd crores of revenue. In 3 years, we'll take that to 1,000 crore business. One of the things that I have learned is that when you embark on this process of building a brand, there is no midway mark. You either are able to do it or you're not able to do it. One of the resources that is very important, never go into it half prepared. You will lose money. For consumer products, the loss can be anywhere between 50 to 200 crores. So your balance sheet must be able to support that investment before that brand actually turns around and starts making any money. More often than not, people think 2-4 crore रुपए लगाएंगे, brand बन जाएगा. They are neither here nor there. Then please save that 5 crores also. Don't waste it. It's, I think, a very expensive proposition building a brand. And this is assuming you have all the attributes marked out properly. I think in today's day and age, there's huge competition. I'm talking now B2C. B2C is a difficult place to build brands. There are much more failures than there are successes. So I think, all the P's of the, So apart from that, I think it's important to have money. And that does not get spoken in any of the old marketing books. That's extremely important. Otherwise, you will fail.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
And then
Chainik.
the brand must relate to the consumer. In whatever space you are, you must give the consumer a good reason to buy your product. Because there is no shortage of anything in the world, in the country today. So unless you have a distinctive positioning of the brand and of the product, you are just going to be me too. Never build a Me Too business. A Me Too business can only survive on one thing, and that is price. And if your price is your area by which you are hoping to survive, you will always be beaten by a competitor sooner rather than later, either from within India or from outside India.
Thank you. Now, I think I'll have the last, because there are so many, it's very, very difficult to stop people. But
maybe Salji, you can lump the questions together if they're on a similar
but
theme.
I don't have the questions actually.
Oh.
This is all happening live actually, and you are live on YouTube.
Okay.
Yeah. So any one of our guests who want to come in. So there are some BGJC young professionals who want to ask. Any of the guests, if they have any, anyone who wants to, please go ahead. Otherwise, we'll have last two ones. One from Chainika. She actually logged in the first. I'm sorry, Chainika. Please do ask. Chainika Joshi.
Actually, Saliji, I was just seeing your the time minute-to-minute program you've seen, and we have till 7:15 because I didn't do as much speech bazi as you had given me time for. So 7:15 is your cutoff time for the question and answer to finish. So we have another 9-10 minutes.
Yeah. Uske beech mein, there are some people who want to share their experiences. They can come in. But yeah, please go ahead. Ask. We can. That's lovely if you can stay. Sure. Yeah, go ahead, Chainika. Chainika. Vipin Agarwal. Chainika, are you ready, or can I ask Vipin Agarwal to ask? Vipin Agarwal, go ahead.
Yes, sir. I'm ready.
Acha, you ready? Please go ahead. Chainika is a very young and energetic. She must have missed her award by a couple of points only.
That's okay, sir. Good evening, sir. Good evening, everyone. So my question is, how do you see COVID-19 for India? Is it going to bring China's business into India? I mean, will India be an investment hub for rest of the countries going forward?
Okay, so this is a, the question is inspired from all the newspaper articles. So I have a very different view. I am not going to be towing the government line and saying that automatically everybody who wants to come will come to India. We have this fallacy, particularly in the government, that there is no other option to India. Now, people have to come to India who want to come because of its population and because of its big market. But they will in any case come. But this transition from manufacturing based from China to wherever it may go, India is not the only destination. Thailand is very competitive. Vietnam is very competitive. I think India, we must address our long-term competitiveness issues, land, labor, capital. Our interest rates are still very high. Our land is very expensive. So I think once we are able to sort out the private sector, the government working together, our fundamental competitive issues and make India more competitive, then a lot more manufacturing will come from China to India, but not with the current set.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Vipin Agarwal. He's the CEO from Raymond's. Very nice to hear. Thank you for joining in.
Very good evening, Mr. Somany. This is absolutely delighting to hear you. And all I can say is you are displaying the transformational leadership, which possibly India needs today very much. Otherwise, this NPS will keep growing. And until we have a leadership like you, my curiosity actually started from your introduction, which gave a very fine blend with respect to your courageous sports and adventurous sports versus a very balanced, calm, quiet, focused businessman. So how do you think your hobby also helps you in your business success?
Look, anything that you do with passion, you normally, you take time out for it and you do it. In my very young days, I did play a little bit of badminton, table tennis, and cricket, but I was good at any of them. So I then decided and shifted many years ago to much more adventurous sports. So I'm a qualified advanced scuba diver. I have gone down regularly to 150 feet down in the ocean. I race cars regularly on racetracks, not on public roads, please. That's highly dangerous. So, you need focus in anything that you do. At the Buddh circuit, for example, on the long straight, I reach speeds of 295 kilometers an hour. You lose focus for 2 seconds, you may not come out in one piece. So, these are very, very, I would say high intensity sports where you need to be very focused. Otherwise, you can do a lot of damage to yourself.
So, sir, if I can ask you, to be very upfront about it, there is also some psychological study which says when you indulge in high adventurous sport like this, there is also some kind of a brashness which comes, because in sports like this, they actually demand something which is. So, do you think there is a change of behavior which happens when you have the sport and it doesn't really kind of play back in your business, which possibly demands something opposite?
No, actually, the sports that I am in need a lot of planning and strategy, particularly the racing, because you have to, otherwise you won't come out in one piece if it at all. So the strategy has to be spot on, and risk-taking ability has to be absolutely fine-tuned to the lowest place of decimal. So actually it teaches you strategy and risk-taking.
This is a very interesting insight, and now I can I've shared a lot of moments of during our business discussions with Mr. Somany, and now I can see where it comes from. Actually, it is serious here. It does make an impact, Mr. Agarwal. What you are saying is it has the way his mind works, the sharpness and the focus with which it works. May have this would have happened maybe. It is possible, yes, sure. He won't know it, or I'm sure he knows it. Never looked at it like that. Wonderful to hear this. This also, because we have a very young, a lot of young people listening to you. And this gives them an inspiration that how important sports can be to actually train you to become a good leader. So we have Mohit Agarwal. Yeah. I see Mohit name. Yeah, Mohit, please ask your question.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, everyone. My question is, what are the keys to developing the next generations of leaders?
Unfortunately, I couldn't understand your question. The voice crackled.
What are the keys to developing the next generation of leaders?
What are the critical key items to develop leaders?
I think if you need to develop leaders, I fundamentally believe that we must be a more tolerant society. We must encourage mistakes. If nobody has made any mistake in his life, then they have not pushed themselves beyond the boundary. That's number one. Corporate India does not look kindly on mistakes. I think mistakes are a part of human. If we have to work, we will make mistakes. Let us learn from our mistakes and not do blunders in future. So I think you need to give young leaders a latitude to make mistakes. I think the other thing is that you must put a lot of trust on them. I think the more you give them a long rope and trust them and empower them, the better you develop them as leaders. Give them a very clear task and tell them to come up with the solution without interfering. And I think the young guys do a great job. They're bright, they're hardworking, they're more often than not, they're very highly qualified, and just give them a rope, long rope. The older people in the organization think they have experience, and because of their superior experience, they will always have all the right answers. But I've always seen that the young people come up with brighter, smarter, out of the box solution. So give them that rope, give them the leeway.
Yeah, Gagan.
Thank you, sir.
Gagan, quickly, and then we'll have Pranav. One of our partners wants to ask you a question, and we'll close, Sandip. So Gagan Agarwal, yeah, he's also a budding chartered
everyone. Good evening, sir. So, sir, my question is, as a successful entrepreneur and leader, you will be doing a lot of for the society. So, will be obliged if you could share your experiences and also some future course of action.
For what?
For society, social and that aspect.
I think it's even without COVID, I think it's very important that God's been very kind to people like me, and I think we have to reinvest some of that goodwill back and give back to society, particularly to the ones who don't have, who are not blessed to have many of the things that you and I take for granted. So we, there's a lot you can do for society. So, we have focused ourselves and both geographically as well as in certain lines of work. So historically, we run a 106-year-old college and school where my grandfather was born in Rajasthan. So that still has about 2,000 children in that village, in that now a small town. So we run that from an educational society. But apart from that, near our plants, we look after sanitation. We encourage the panchayats to give us some land and put drinking water facilities, state of the art for them, and return the unit back to them. So the land is theirs, the equipment we buy and put in, they give us the water and then they supply to the villagers. We only do the long-term contract so that the equipment is kept working. We do a lot of skill development in the areas that we work and then employ the skilled labor. We do a lot of infrastructure work like making roads, lighting, for the night, closed circuit cameras so that people feel safe on the road. So we do anything that makes the environment safer and better for the people who are living in these rural areas. We also have a system across all our plants that, of course, for our workers, the medical attention is free. But we have opened across all our facilities, a doctor and a nurse is available 24/7. And we have on an average 400 people coming from the villages and we treat them medically free of charge. 400 people a day visit these medical, I would not say camps because camps is temporary in nature. These are permanent buildings that we have built near our plants where anybody from that village or around can come and get free medical assistance. So I think, one, they don't have to pay for a doctor. Second, they don't have to pay for any medication. All the medical medicines, etc., are delivered to them free. So I think that uplifts the area and reduces, medical issues in that area. They don't have to go to the government hospital then, etc., etc. We also do a fair bit on education in terms of rural literacy to make sure that people can read either Hindi or the local language and English, and vocational skills. So computer education, we do a lot, and then gift our old computers, etc., which are still in perfectly working order to all these people so that they can, start learning and making a living.
So that
Yes,
answers
sir,
that.
Thank you, sir.
There are a lot of people still waiting in line, but my apologies to all of them. We have the last one from Mr. Pranav Jain. Yes.
Good evening, sir. So my question is slightly different. What questions are you asking yourself lately?
Oh, that's a tough one. Actually, when we were originally locked out, all plants were closed. There was plenty of time to ask questions in terms of very fundamental questions. So, I would spend every day, I would take a 2.5 hour slot and speak to one of our CEOs. Our businesses are very federal. Every business is looked after by CEO. I am there to make sure that the strategy is right and to look after mergers and acquisitions, that kind of thing. The businesses are run by the CEOs. So we would ask very deep probing questions about the business and many of the underlying assumptions of the business. So, in a time like this, you ask fundamental questions. Why are we in this business? What can we do to improve this business? What is our strategic positioning in the business? If you want a particular author, these are the very typical Michael Porter type of questions. Competitive strategy, competitive advantage, which many of you would have read in your earlier days in life. So in this period, I read all his books all over again. I have read them 35 years ago, but some knowledge remained, some I forgot. So I read them again. So I was asking fundamental questions, and from these fundamental questions, we are closing one of our businesses. It used to lose money, 10, 12 crores. Okay, not a serious amount of money, but 10, 12 crores in today's days is still 10, 12 crores. And we are closing that business down. So we are asking the fundamental question, why should we remain in the business? Can we grow in this business? Is it a profitable business? Is it a sustainable business? Etc., etc. And we are putting a lot more money in businesses we believe will be a high growth business. Fortunately for us, our balance sheets are very good. We've never relied on very high amounts of debt. So at least those questions we didn't have as to whether we will survive, not survive, etc., etc., which are also for many corporates a very relevant question. So,
Thank you.
And you did mention, somebody did mention that I read a lot on aircrafts, automobiles and all, but not only that, I actually read a lot. I read about, I read 8 newspapers, about 70 magazines a month. I read about 2 hours a day, apart from management books. I don't have now time for fiction that I left many, many years ago. But on management, I regularly read and I'm updated. And I read anything that is a hobby or otherwise, I read quite a lot every day, on an average 2 hours a day. So that's the one way of keeping yourself updated.
Yeah, I want to share with you guys, when you enter into his room, you can't see him because his table is full of only books and magazines. And somewhere behind there is one gentleman sitting. That's his room. So I think there are 2-3 people who are requesting me. I do not know, whoever is the administrator, do we have time or we close? Because they are pressing me to ask these questions. Who is the administrator? Do I finish? Because it's 7:22 now. Okay, I think let's close because this will continue. We have a very interesting evening. It's unfortunate that you will not be remaining with us, because people, you or maybe if you can, we are having people showing talent live on YouTube from within the firm after this formal session. So I'll request our partner, Mr. Diptikant Parhi, to thank you for being with us today in a formal manner, please. And after that, of course, we continue for the rest of others.
आपका म्यूट है दीपिका जी.
Can Diptikant?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Salil sir. Good evening, everyone. It was indeed a great pleasure listening to Mr. Sandip Somany today, and his clarity of thoughts regarding leadership requirements is certainly path-breaking. Everyone here would have benefited from your address, sir, and the prompt answers to the questions you have given. Before we move on to our next segment of experience sharing by our esteemed guest and showcasing BGJC talent, I would like to sincerely thank you for being with us tonight and your dynamic address. BGJC is privileged. On behalf of myself and BGJC, I thank you very much, Mr. Somany, Mr. Bed Jain, past president, Mr. Pramod Jain, and Mr. Nanda, member of Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, for being here with us today. I request my colleague, Mr. Pranav Jain, to take this forward now. Thank you, everyone, once again.
Thank you, Sandip. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the invite, Salil ji. Pleasure speaking to all of you, all your partners, your friends. Thank you very much for inviting me.
No, it was a wonderful evening. There are so many people who are sending me messages. I wish this was an open evening and you would have seen. But iska fayda ye hua ki you spent so much time with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All the best. All the best.
Thank you.
Pranav, handing over to you.
Thank you, Diptikant ji. Thank you, Salil.